Hello and welcome to another episode of Because Things Can Be Different, the podcast that tries to cover everything design and business related. We're focusing on the coffee industry for the Global Coffee Festival, which we've been involved in and designed the set and stuff and what you would have seen during the festival and during the lab talks and other such things. We've been working with the guys for quite a while now across all their different festivals. And when they asked us to put some content together about helping people who are going to start a coffee shop, already have a coffee shop and want to do it better, we jumped at the chance. So that's why we have this podcast. And today we're going to be talking to Mr. Oliver Underwood, my design manager from Liquid Group.
Hello, yeah.
So, I believe you tried to drill this down to just 3 key points.
Yeah, so what we want to be doing today is just chatting to you guys about, I guess, the bricks and mortar side of things. To do with, obviously, I tend to focus on the interior design, but you cannot deny the importance of bricks and mortar when you come to that.
You need some bricks to make the interior.
So, yeah, this episode, talking about that, bricks and mortar. Next episode, in relation to interior design, we're going to be focusing more on sort of like design trends and
bit of layout and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, broken this down into the bricks and mortar side of things into sort of 3 key areas of focus: location, property, and budget. And these are the 3 areas worth, looking into, where there could be some pitfalls. Some people.
Yeah, I was going to say they're things to look at, but they are the ones that come with the most pitfalls within each section. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah.
I guess that's why. Well, as soon as you told me these were the sections, I knew why you had gone that way. It's the sort of things that we would deal with a client or for a client that can be the ones that can cause the most stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, the location. What are we looking for with the location?
Well, firstly, I mean, it's fair to say that before you start to talking about location, you need to make sure you've got your objectives in place and your brand sort of aligned and ready to go, which you and Mike discussed.
Yeah, all the things we talked in episode 1 and 2 should filter in into these 3 things actually, but especially when it comes to locations. Your business model and your brand strategy should point you in the right direction from a location point of view, whether that's which city you need to be in or even which country, but which city you need to be in or which town, and then whereabouts in the said town.
Yeah, so once you've sort of got that worked out, it's the right location for your brand, for your business. So, for example, if you predominantly want to cater for commuters, they will exist again soon. You need to make sure you're in the right location to get commuters. So you don't want to be in a back street somewhere where with no footfall. If you want to be catering for a relatively high-end demographic, you need to make sure again you're in the right location for that. And if you want to get more of a hipster
from the passers by, or whether it's a location that people are going to deliberately go out their way to get to.
So if you want to serve a community, if you're a real sort of community hub, then you have to be in the right place to be a community hub for your coffee shop.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, when you're talking about commuters, for example, that is very much a takeaway model. If that is your primary focus, we've had people talking to us about their business model, and they are trying to create kind of a luxurious space, but then their main focus is going to be on people that are going to drop by, grab a coffee and walk back out again. So their dwell time is almost non-existent. And I think that's the bit where it comes to location. If your dream business model and your dream brand strategy that you're trying to create is this thing where people sit there and have the best quality coffee, maybe it's a brew bar, which in its own right takes longer.
You're trying to create a sort of atmosphere.
Exactly. And then you're aiming it or parking it next to a tube station in London, and no one's got any time, because we all know what it's like in London. We end up running because we're always trying to get somewhere as quickly as possible. We don't have time even if we want to. So then your better location.
You get this misalignment. Really,
exactly, yeah. And it all sounds really obvious, but it can go missing when you find a property that you really like or a location you really like, because you can see that there's going to be customers around. You need to make sure you try and focus on getting the right customers and fitting with the demographic and everything else we talked about in the last episode.
There is so much to keep your mind on when you're trying to create local coffee shop, a dreamer basically. So sometimes these maybe rather obvious things can get forgotten about,
and
they?
we've seen it, and we've had to highlight it to customers. That's why we think it's clear. It becomes clear the importance of having third parties involved. So whether that is a design agency like ourselves, branding agency, or realtors, business planners and other such things, can really help just look at it where it's not their baby, so they can have a bit more of an objective view.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's a right location that's right for your brand and your sort of business objectives. Footfall is another one. So
don't be scared of standing outside and counting how many people walk past in different times of day. We've got customers that haven't done that, and it's been a mistake. And we've got other customers where you can't really figure out why they've picked a location, and then they open it up and it's got an amazing footfall of just the right people because they've kind of paid attention to it. There are companies out there, it's worth pointing out, that will do stuff like this for you, or a good realtor will be able to give you these type of stats. So it's worth paying attention to. So
because it does come down to the math a little bit, which is not our strong suits, but
it's not our expertise, but it's something we do pay attention to.
Yeah, because if you got to say what are so if you're selling coffee and cake, for example, how much coffee and cake do you need to sell to remain profitable, and what is the average spend per customer, and are you going to get enough customers to actually make that up?
Yeah, I mean, can you just sell coffee and cake, or do you need a bigger food offering? I.e., do you need to go for the brunch, lunch market, or breakfast?
The coffee and model.
The coffee and model, exactly. Do you need to open in the evenings to serve alcoholic drinks, other such things, because the margins are there that then help make that location
justify the location.
Justify the location. And there's some great models out there, which I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening to this will know who we're talking about. There's a couple of companies out there who have done a great job of that diversification, and the coffee and model. So that I think that covers location. Obviously we can't drill it down too much because we're hoping that this is useful for people all around the world to a certain extent, and the location is very business centric. It's gonna have to be,
I think but you touched on the best advice is to have that third party sort of person with their opinion to weigh in.
Don't be scared.
Take yourself out of the equation a little bit and look at it from the outside and decide whether it's
if you're not going to have the third person, take yourself out and make yourself the third person. Try and take the emotions out, which we understand is much harder than it sounds a lot of the time. Yeah, exactly. So the next one there is you've got your location, and then you've got your property.
Yeah, so you've been lucky enough to find a property in the location. You now need to make sure that property is actually right for you in terms of what you need it to offer you, what you need it to do for you and your business. So well, I guess there's sort of two types of property. Well, there's lots of types of properties, but really they fall into two camps: new build, sort of shell, and existing properties. Shells can trip people up. These new build shells,
they can. I think that it is because it's a big open space. Sometimes it's a big concrete block, or better than that, a white box. It can look like all you have to do is put some furniture in there.
You literally just drop your interior in.
And sometimes, don't get us wrong, that is the case. But I think there's some pitfalls that we've run into with customers that have already got their property before talking to us that I think we're worth highlighting.
So they're basically like a lot of them, what we've seen anyway, they're like a concrete, they're a concrete box. And when we mean that, I mean concrete exposed walls, concrete floor, etc. And they've got
brickwork,
a breeze block. They've got nothing in there, to the point that the thing that people have overlooked is the floor. That's
yes, I knew you were going to bring that up. So bring the floor to height, you mean?
So the floor
covering can be an expensive thing, but I think the thing that people have not spotted in the past that has cost them quite a bit of money is the bring the floor to height.
So it might be 50 mil below.
So fit well, like we were talking about before we started recording this, was
a couple of inches.
You can go from 50 mil, a couple of inches, to we've had 150 mil in one place that we were talking to, where it was, so that's almost the height of a short man, down. And now obviously they didn't miss that being expensive, but that was because it needed a massive amount of soundproofing installation because there was a tube underneath it.
That is
So,
an extreme. But
yeah, it's a massive extreme, but it just shows this is, I think, where you go. So 150, that's going to cost something. Something's got to fill that void. The bit that gets confused is when it's only a couple of inches or 50 millimeters or 60, got up to the 6 millimeters. Everyone just thinks it's going to be really simple and it's not going to cost very much money. Now, unfortunately, that is normally not the case, is it?
yeah, so basically, you've got to bring the floor up to level. You have to do that before you can lay down any of the flooring you might like wood flooring or tiles or what have you. And obviously that costs money, and the customer's not going to see the benefit of that. It's essential, but they're not going to see the benefit of that. So you've got to pour in quite a lot of your money, your own money, if you're renting, to effectively finish someone else's building. And I think that's worth...
Yeah, I mean, most of our clients around the world, it's normally a lease that they're signing on a commercial property. It's rare that they own it. If you do own it, it does change the math slightly because you have, the value you're adding to the property. But for this purpose, we're going to stick with rental properties because you are adding value to someone else's property that wasn't there before, and you're not necessarily going to get that back. If you get it that wrong, it'll ruin your return on investment sometimes.
Yeah.
So we had a customer who had got a property already, and they didn't realise, and please don't rely on the agent or the landlord to tell you these things, because it's not in their best interest to do so. But it was tens of thousands of pounds they spent on bringing the floor up, 60 mil, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We sent our building control guy in at the beginning before we commenced work, and he pointed out the fact that actually no insulation had been put into the original build of these luxury flats, and we had to put insulation in as part of the cost. So the client then had to foot the bill for putting insulation in before we even poured concrete, and before we then poured the high quality concrete to polish on the top.
And all of these things are just worth bearing in mind because it will give you scope for negotiating rent-free periods. Because you don't want to negotiate a 6-month rent-free period, for example, and then it turns out actually you've got to spend a lot more money.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of like 30 grand's worth of rent, and actually you've got 30 grand spent immediately on the floor, so you've got no electrics, no lighting, nothing. Yeah, that is, again, I know this is not the exciting side of this stuff, but this is the bit that can make your business profitable, or be paying all of these problems back for the first 6-7 years instead of the first couple of years. So it is a real key part of the design, I suppose. It is the design, but it's the selection of the property and budgetary constraints that are linked to that.
I mean, that's the flooring. We won't dwell on that much longer, but then the other things worth bearing in mind, and this is whether it's one of those sort of shell scheme new builds or whether it's an existing property. Air conditioning and ducting, need to make sure you've got the HVAC. We've got the budgets for that. I mean, obviously, if it's a coffee shop, you might not need an extensive system. If you've got a kitchen, we've done a bakery recently, that needed an extensive system. So the budgets need to be, that needs to be made aware of.
You need to understand what that property is going to need to put your idea into it. I think that's the bit that can be missed. So
because it's not that glamorous.
A property we did, it's not that glamorous, and it's kind of like, do we really need to worry about that? And the answer is yes. And sometimes in some properties it's really yes, because it can be thousands of pounds to meet building regs or the landlord's wants and needs. So we dealt with a property recently that needed an extensive amount of HVAC extraction put in because of smells to high-end apartments, where basically you weren't allowed to smell anything from outside the building because there was very high-end apartments above, which makes complete sense. But it's not the landlord's responsibility, because you could have gone and put in, a newspaper shop there and it wouldn't have smelled at all. If someone wants to be cooking in that building, the landlord expects you to then put a system in that expels the smells, and it ended up running, I think, wasn't it like 10 meters or something for an underground car park? Well, that costs a lot of money to do that. So those things, the client actually knew about that. This wasn't him not knowing about that. That was taken. It's worth pointing out, and all of his rent free and his negotiation was based off the back of that. But it's something that if it was missed, it could be a huge problem. So you really need to make sure that you pay attention.
And they are
to
relatively easy to overlook because they're just not that interesting. but they are. You know.
Yeah, it can be the thing that stops you from being able to put the furniture in.
Power's another thing, isn't it?
Power's a good one. Yeah, that can cause some problems.
So again, new build, you've probably just got a couple of wires coming in, and you're probably going to need to therefore invest in your fuse boxes, etc., and you'll you get a proper
start from scratch.
Yeah,
and,
you are really.
Which
You
can
are
be
starting from scratch.
that's not just on a new build, is it? Sometimes it just needs to be updated.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we've had customers miss before is the amount of power coming into the building. So how do we explain this where it doesn't get confusing across borders? So let's not talk about amps and how many amps you need, because like the States and stuff run different power to us. So let's not go into that detail, but let's talk about if you need 100 to run all your machines, let's call 100 units to run all your machines, you can get cables coming into buildings, especially in London, that will only have 60 units coming in. Let's put it like that. So you cannot then run your coffee machine, your grinders, your everything. So you do need to put that type of stuff to the front before you start the creative part of the design.
Yeah.
You need to know if you're going to run 3 coffee machines, you're asking 3 times more power than someone that's running 1. So when you're going to look at the property, you want to make sure that you've got a decent amount of power coming in. You want 100 units. That means it gives you the flexibility to run the machines and the equipment that you want.
Yeah.
Again, super boring. We're aware of it, but it's
not a mistake
mass...
you want to make, really.
No. We've had a client that unfortunately had the 60 units coming in and they needed 100 units. Well, you have to get the power company to dig up the pavement at your own cost to run from the mains that was in the roads. They have to get a license for that. They have to get a license to close one side of the road to then dig it up, put a bigger cable into your building to run it. You don't even own this building. The client didn't own this building in the end. It was rented. They have to pay all of that, and the worst one for that is the time frames.
Yeah, I mean that is worth. I mean it's all doom and gloom at the moment, obviously. But yeah, your time constraints need to be factored in. It's not just budgets. So any of what we've discussed really can.
As soon as you get local authorities, as we call them in the UK, or your state, if you're in the States, or governmental bodies, like, Middle East, everyone has someone that is in control of some of these things, where it goes into like national grids and stuff like that. Soon as they're involved, a lot of the time, some countries are better than others, some states are better than others, and some counties are better than others. But a lot of the time, they just run slowly because it's a big, heavy, governmental body. Really, you want to avoid needing to deal with them any more than is absolutely
because if you're
necessary.
negotiating a 6-month rent period, and it's going to take you 6 months to negotiate all of these,
or just get them in, like a waiting list. The waiting list went from 8 weeks to 3 months or something in one of the jobs we had, because they had a massive influx. And then with this current situation, a lot of government bodies have had lots of trouble keeping up because they've furloughed people, or they've sent people working from home, and planning. I know we've been working on some planning for a couple of clients, and that is now a huge amount extra to what is legally normally allowed to take. So again, we don't want to drill down into little details too much, and what you would deal with in the UK opposed to the States or the Middle East, but it's all things you need to pay attention to. So you really need to look and make sure there's enough power coming into that building, and if there's not, how much is it going to cost, and how long is it going to take to get that put
and if
in.
it's not going to work for you, find another property,
move on to another property. That's what we're trying. I know this sounds kind of worrying and everything else, but it's better to
worry about it before you sign up to the property than afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
The only other thing just worth highlighting quickly is plumbing. Your wastewater pipe specifically.
Water coming into the building is normally not that much of a problem, but it will be your wastewater, whether you've got a toilet in the building or not, whether you need a toilet in the building.
And obviously where your toilet's going to be is going to be dictated to where your wastewater is, and also
there and thereabouts, normally.
And then where your counter is going to be as well, because obviously you're going to have wastewater coming out of that. So if your heart is set on a counter at the front of your store, and that's very important to your brand, and you're like
100 meters away from the waste, you're going to cause a problem. It's not that it's impossible by any means, and you could be up on a second floor unit, and it's easy to move these things. So please don't read into these things as gospel. It's just we're trying to highlight them so to prove these to not be problems, rather than pretend they're not there. Would you say just if you listen to this and then went and viewed a property, and you could just say that that's not as much of a problem as they made it sound, that's not as much, then you're winning. That's all we're trying to highlight here. So I think that moves nicely on to the next section, which is budget.
So, budget's quite an important one for us to discuss.
It's your favourite subject, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the reason it is money's a weird one because people, in my experience, and I guess yours is, not many people like talking about money. Understandably, maybe.
I mean, we are British, so it's a slight. No one likes talking about money in Britain.
But basically, knowing your budget is fundamentally important to the project. There are a number of things that dictate the end result, your brand, your brief, the way you want it to look. But ultimately, your budget is so important. You might want your interior to have marble and gold everywhere, but if your budget won't allow that, obviously we wouldn't recommend marble and gold anyway. But if your budget won't allow that, then there's a disconnect. So getting that pitched right for your brand and your objectives is
it comes back to, it loops all the way back to where you're doing your strategy, your brand strategy and your business strategy at the beginning of all of this before you've gone to look for a property. If you're going super, super high end, then that has led you into, so you've gone super high end, you've got the brand that looks that way, sounds that way, you've got the right name and you've got the demographic. Then you go to your location. So say, let's go London, you go Mayfair because that ties in nicely with that. Then you found your property, you've got all your drainage and your power and all of the boring bits sorted out and your floors up to level and everything else. None of that matters if you haven't aligned your budget with a high end interior of a high end location. So if you spend all your money on your deposits and everything else, and your cushion for your rent for the first year,
you got 20 grand to spend on your budget.
Yeah, you got £20,000 budget on your interior. It's not going to be particularly high end by the time you finish. And I think a common mistake is how creativity can bridge the gap.
Bridge the gap. That's it. Yeah. And it can bridge the gap to a certain extent. We can, and any designer can make intelligent design decisions and material choices to basically give you the biggest bang for your buck. But it only goes so far. I think that's fair to say.
I think that's fair to say, and it can be mistaken by people and even just friends of mine. You know, talking down the pub, it's kind of like I'm doing my own house and I want it to look a certain way, and because I own a design agency doesn't mean that I can have it look exactly the way I want for the lowest budget. I can save money, I can make some clever decisions, but you know as well, you've worked on your house and said the same thing. There's certain things that you want that just cost money. It doesn't, and there's no getting away from it. To get to a certain look, there's a certain amount of money needed, and I think that's, although it sounds very simple, it's important.
And if your budget is tighter, then pulling in favours from friends and chipping in yourself and helping out is the way. But I think that really kind of covers it when it comes to budget.
Yeah, I think it's key, just whoever you're working with, from a design point of view. So any design firm or designer you're working with, it's key that you see it as a partnership and that you trust them to spend your money accordingly. So
any designer, it's in their interest to give you the biggest bang for their buck, because as designers we want to create the best we possibly can.
Yeah.
So
and they need a reputation. If you've never heard of them before, then yes, they could be a complete shyster that's going to give you a 20 grand job for 100. Obviously, if they've got a decent portfolio and they've worked with customers and you can profile them and maybe ring a past customer and see how they are and how they've worked with them in the past, then you should then feel quite secure in giving them the budget, you know, not holding your cards so close to your chest that the people that are trying to help you win the game aren't even involved in it. And I think where we've really helped our customers is where it's been a partnership from the beginning, from all of this. But when it comes to budget, it just means we need to know your best thing.
Any designer needs to know their budget, your budget, or whoever's budget, to be able to give them the most amount for their...
A slight warning, I would say, is when people just say that they can do it. So companies say they can do it. Budget's not really discussed, or they throw a number out of how much it costs. I would say that was a highlight. And we don't say that to badmouth other companies or fit-out companies. We say it to the ones that we've had to pick up the pieces afterwards.
I think, just to touch on quickly, there's in our experience, there's two different types of companies out there. Now, there's design studios that do fit out, which is what we are, and then there's fit out companies that do design. Now, maybe a generalization, but fit out companies that do design, they do tend to be able to give you more of a straightforward when it comes to the price, what you should be spending, what it was going to come in at to do your interior, because they just do the same design each time, so it's more cookie cutter. Now, as a design studio, first and foremost, any design studio first and foremost doesn't really know what the end result's going to be because they haven't designed it yet. So therefore, there has to be some real world limitations.
They haven't drilled down the strategy and stuff, because we may offer you the branding and everything, but we work with companies that have already had the brand or have built the brand with someone else, and then we get that brand strategy from them, and then we will build that out, and we will work with them with their budget and everything else to create the interior. So it's about just partnering with the right people. And if you're doing it yourself, you just need to step back and become us for the day and look at it from that point of view. Can I really achieve the Mayfair high-end look where I've only got £5,000 to spend? I mean, let's all be honest with each other and say, no, you're probably not going to do that. So can I change my whole strategy, because the money is no more money is available, so maybe we need to go for something a little bit more cool, a little bit more edgy, where we can use some cheaper materials, or do I just need to find the bigger budget? And that's real. That's
pretty much the crux of it, isn't it? I mean, the next episode is going to be slightly more upbeat.
We're just going to talk about more about layout and stuff like that, and things to keep an eye out, and then trends and what we would advise people to look at, and things we see moving forward. So until next time, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.